Better, thank you.
Okay, next week's speaker is going to be our own Dorsa Sadiq from computer science, then Josh Berg from UCSF, Gary Marcus, Michael Frank. But today it is with great pleasure to have Christos Papadimitriou from Columbia University. Christos has done deep and lasting contributions to computer science, specifically theoretical computer science and computational complexity. He has also used sort of computation or computational complexity as a lens on different sciences, economics, game theory. The field of algorithmic game theory is one of the founders of the field, to the field of evolution, and now the study of the brain. In addition to all of that, he has written textbooks, comic books, novels in multiple languages. And today he's going to talk about how does the brain beget them on. Thank you.
Many thanks. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. Very good to see you all. I have been here for 2 years. Okay, so, but now these 2 years are past and I'm back. Okay, so I just want to point out to you that what is happening right now is nothing sort of miraculous. What I mean is that I'm creating airwaves, and you take these airwaves and you create hierarchical knowledge, trees, and with any luck, you will never forget it. Even some of you are students of the brain, but even you, I know, believe that the brains do amazing things, but this is the most amazing of all. And so, how does it happen? Okay, how do people do this? Why are they able to do it? And the bottom line is that we have no idea. We don't know. We sort of know a few things. It happens in the left hemisphere that these two areas, broca's area and Wernicke's area, we have known them for 150 years that they're involved. And we have no doubt that this happens, this is affected by neurons and molecules and synapses. Okay? But how? Okay, how is it possible? Okay, what happens in between? We are starting to get some insight. Okay, so for example, I'll show you about a few experiments. So there is a very ingenious experiment that happened a few years ago at NYU. What they did is they read sort of a recording of single syllable words at 4 Hertz for every second, and to many subjects, and they recorded MEG, MEG. So, and what happened is then they did the spectrum of this of the signal, and no surprise, there was a peak at 4 Hertz. And then they did something very clever. They repeated the experiment with where now every 4 words make sense. Okay? And guess what happened in the experiment? Now there are 3 peaks. There is again the peak at 4 Hertz, because 4 times every second you have to fetch words from your brain. But then there is a peak at 1 Hertz, which means that once every second we do something different. Okay, what is it? We create a sentence. And twice every second, again, something happens. What is it? We create a phrase, because you see, these are sort of symmetric sentences, okay? Like bad cats eat fish. Okay? To summarize, what I think happens, what I think this experiment suggests very, very strongly is that this happens. That trees are built. A few years back, I had lunch with Chris Manning, and in the middle of I left my fork and asked him something very strange, something like, "For the love of God, Chris, do we have trees in our brain?" And Chris thought for a while and he said, "Yeah, we have trees in our brain." And frankly, I have asked Chris this because I thought that he would be one of the most sane people to say, probably not, but I was very impressed by this. Okay, so it completely changed my attitude. Okay. It's a mystery, to a neuroscientist, okay, because how are these trees created? And if you do the math, you have to only 12 spikes to create a node of the tree. Why 12? Because neuron spikes are about 50 hertz, and language proceeds at 4 hertz. What happens now? Okay, so this is remarkable. I don't think anybody knows how this can be done. Here is another experiment. The ball hit the track hit the ball. Different areas of the superior temporal gyrus responded to track. That's where Wernicke's area is in the two sentences. So which means apparently that our brain has a different place for object and a different place for subject. Okay, so at some point when we hear a sentence, we make a combinatorial decision. That was the subject, that was the object, and put them in different places. Okay, so now let's as I told you, I don't think anybody knows how this happens. Okay, there are people who know a lot about it, but there are huge gaps in our knowledge. So when you cannot answer the problem, you generalize it. Okay, so the question is, how does the mind emerge from the brain? Okay, this is of which what I told you before is a special case. And there is a huge gap there. Not only of scale, obviously, but also many other things like experimental subjects, way of thinking. So there is a mindset. These are two very, very, very different areas, and there is no way to bridge it. Okay, that cognitive science studies high-level cognitive phenomena, and the neuroscience studies neurons and synapses. Richard Axel put this very nicely recently. He said, "I do not have a logic for a transformation of neural activity into thought. I view discerning this logic as the most important future direction of neuroscience." Okay? And the point is that for me, there are two surprises here. Okay, one is that Axel, who is like a very dedicated empirical scientist, used the word logic. Okay, which to me means sort of a formal computational system. And the second surprise is that I don't know anybody else who's working on this problem. Okay, and if you are, please tell me. Okay, does computation happen in the brain? I have no doubt that computation does happen in the brain. Okay, so when people ask me, why do you think that computation happens in the brain? The only rational answer I can give is that if computation happens in the brain, then this gives hope that at some point I'm going to understand the brain, and not otherwise. Certainly, it happens in molecules. It happens in spiking neurons and synapses and circuits. Now we know that lots of computation happens in the dendrites, the input device of the neurons. And of course, it happens in the whole brain. I mean, in a very concrete way that cognitive neuroscientists make an experiment and then they write a paper that says, you see, the subject acts as if they are executing this program. You know, so computation does happen very high. And the question is, what's in the middle? And this is what I'm going to tell you today. There is, I think that there is computation happening in the middle, and the agents of this computation are assemblies or ensembles or sets of neurons, or populations of neurons. And I'm going to try to convince you that these are actually implemented, can be implemented by spiking neurons and synapses, and that they can enact, they can affect complex cognitive phenomena such as language. Okay, so this is my plan. So first of all, what are assemblies of neurons? Those of you who are old enough remember that in the 70s and 80s, they were trying to tell us that we have a grandmother cell. And if this grandmother cell fires, then we remember our grandmother. But I mean, since then we have learned a lot of things. For example, that every neuron talks to about 10,000 other neurons, okay? And as a result, if there was only one neuron that represents the grandmother, then there is no grandmother. So now they're called them Jennifer Aniston cells, okay? Cells, many cells, maybe tens of thousands of cells. And all of them together, they represent, every time they fire together in some pattern, they represent Jennifer Aniston. Okay? The reason they know is that they detected this, they found such a cell in a subject. Okay, they showed a lot of pictures, and this cell was firing every time that they saw the picture of Jennifer Aniston. Okay, so they decided that this is part of a larger group. How do you know it was a very large group? Because they can't be so lucky, so to show a couple of hundred pictures and get a hit. Okay, so if you are recording from a few dozen or hundred neurons. Okay, so you make a back to the level calculation, and you see that there must be tens of thousands of cells. Incidentally, after this talk, you are going to have not just Jennifer Aniston cells, but Jennifer Aniston cells. All right. So assemblies of neurons are not science fiction, are not something that are made up. Okay, have 70-something years ago first conjecture that they exist, and neuroscientists have been looking for them for a long time, but only in the beginning of the 21st century they had the technology to actually, beyond any doubt, find them. Now they, they create them in experimental animals. They light them, they fire them up. So they play with them, they change them, they mute them. So it's assemblies are old news. Okay. What's an assembly? It's a large and densely interconnected set of excitatory neurons in a brain area, whose firing in a pattern is not amount to our thinking of a particular memory, okay, like concept, person, name, word, episode, etc. In his recent beautiful book, The Brain from Inside Out, Yori Buzaki calls assemblies the alphabet of the brain. Okay, so those of us who are old enough to remember the dilemma: is intelligent symbolic or sub-symbolic? What I see assemblies is a place where sub-symbolic becomes symbolic. If you are if this talk interests you a little, I encourage you to look at this recent paper, where especially look at figure. Okay, that's a quick way to get the gist of this paper. Okay, so what's the assembly hypothesis? That there is an intermediate level of brain computation, that it causes higher cognitive functions such as reasoning, planning, language, storytelling, math, science, music, the good stuff. And assemblies of neurons are its basic representation, it's data type. Okay, so I have to, computer scientists will know that next come the operations. Okay, what are the methods? And there is a very short list. Okay, so the projection, association, merge, pattern complete, plus some control commands. But I'm not going to bother you with all this. I'm going to show you, to explain to you what's the basic operation, which is projection. Okay, projection is how assemblies are born, it's how they are copied to have copied in many other regions to have a life of their own. Okay, so here's a scenario. You already have an assembly. I show it as a circle, but you know that there are scattered neurons all over the place on the left side. Okay, there it's in the brain area. There is another area, and there is this red arrow, which means that there is a lot of synapses that go, random synapses going on in this new area. And the green arrow tells you that there is a lot of recurrent connectivity. Okay, and assume that both of these are random. Random in the what computer scientists and mathematicians know as GNP sense. Okay, that every edge is determined with very small probability independently. And also assume that there is heavy plasticity, and there is this other symbol here, which means that there is inhibition in the new area. In other words, there are neurons whose job is to tell other neurons, don't be so excited, calm down, all is okay. Okay, so so what happens now in this setup if the first assembly fires repeatedly? We have known that in this circuit for a long time, we have known that one of its principal behaviors is the creation of new memory. Okay, and indeed, so let me tell you what the mechanism is. And you can sort of live with me this experience, how a new assembly is created. So this one fires, and in response, a lot of synaptic current goes this way. But then there is this inhibition that does not let everybody get excited. And so the story I'm telling is only a few, let's say K, of the neurons on the right-hand side fire. Okay, and this is sort of a new population. Okay, but then, of course, these two fire again, and now the situation changes, because now there is a recurrent computation, and now the recurrent connections, and as a result, there is afferent current coming here, and there is recurrent current from these assemblies that fire. And as a result, from these neurons that fire. And as a result, this is going to be displaced a little. Okay, for the large range of parameters, this displacement is about 50%. Okay, in the first time. So it will become something like this. And then, of course, the same thing will happen, and so on. Okay. And now we stop and think. Does this process converge? Does it converge after dozens of steps? And is the result densely connected, as I promised? And will it respond to a new firing of the stimulus? Okay, because we want it to be a copy of the stimulus of the left-hand side. And so when it fires again, it should fire. Will it pattern complete? This means, is it stable enough so that if you light up, let's say, 20% of these neurons, the rest of the assembly will complete, okay, or 95%. Yeah.
And so where are you transitioning from? This is how the brain works to it's conceivable.
Right. So all right. So assemblies happen. Okay. I know. So this process is strongly suggested by experiments. Okay, so it was first described very explicitly by Richard Axel in a paper, with Franks back in 2011. Okay, but so it is not. This is not science fiction either. Okay. Yeah. So it's sort of these are behaviors that have been observed. Okay, in experiments and have been theoretically predicted. Yeah. And here is something that is sort of our obsession, but has not been noticed experimentally. Is this? Is stimulus overlap preserved? Okay, by this I mean if two stimuli are overlap. Okay, in other words, if two assemblies overlap, they share, let's say, 20% of their neurons, and they are projected to a new area. Will this also overlap? Because you see, the overlap of assemblies is important because basically it records affinity, some kind of coherence or something. So, and actually, for this, we have also experiments that show that this affinity can be created. Please, interrupt me if there are questions. Okay, so the answer to all these questions is yes. Okay, but how do we know? Okay, so we are going to need a math model. Okay, so here, not all talks have a slide like this slide. Okay, I'll show you a mathematical model of the brain. Okay, so imagine finite number of regions. Each contains n neurons. Inhibition dictates that only k of this fire. Some pairs of area are connected by fibers. These are the red arrows, bipartite random graphs, and all are recurrently connected by directed bipartite graphs. Okay, by directed graphs. Any comments? Any questions? So neurons fire in discrete steps. This is an assumption that is as convenient as it is indefensible. Okay, and the K with the highest synaptic input are selected to fire. Okay, this models inhibitory excitatory balance. This operation we call it random project and cap. Okay, RPC, and it is a basic primitive of this theoretical sort of take on assemblies.
Curious, how does the randomness fit into this?
Okay, so the question is how does randomness fits in this theory? Okay, so first of all, it's a very important part of it. Okay, I can explain. I'll explain why. So the question is, what are synapses? Are they random or not? Okay, so we know that synapses cannot be completely random. Okay, for example, there are fibers but what I need here is that they're random at least to some degree. Okay, why is randomness helpful? Because if you need to absolutely sure, you better make everything random. Okay, it turns out. This is the paradox in mathematics. Okay, so we know that because of the low lambda number, when everything is random, you know a lot of stuff. Okay, you can conclude a lot of stuff. So we know that they are not uniform, that the synapses, even within the same little areas or millimeter by square millimeter, they are not exactly completely random. Okay, they are not uniformly random. Okay, but there are strong biases. But there is enough randomness, I assume. So the main parameters of the model, I'm thinking of n as 100 million, 10 to 100 million, k in the tens of thousands, p very small, and beta, which is the plasticity. In other words, when a neuron fires and there is a synapse from this neuron to another neuron, and the next step, this neuron fires, then this edge becomes more powerful. Okay, by a factor, let's say by 5%. Okay. So all these, so the main ideas, the main assumptions the main ideas, mathematical ideas, is randomness, selection, plasticity. Okay, which if you think about are the main ideas in all of life. Okay, and the basic operation is the random projection. So to come back to these questions, I will answer the first one: does it converge? And this is something that with my friend Santosh and Paolo we have been sharpening our math over the past few years, and now, so we have a rather tight theorem that the projection process converges exponentially fast and with high probability. That's where all the mathematical results we have more than mathematical results, we have simulations, but the mathematical results, which I guess we proved because this is the kind of people we have. Okay? So the mathematical results, all of them are with high probability. Okay? Again, pumping these randomness, there was a question.
Yeah, there was a question on Zoom. What's the source of randomness in the brain?
The connectome, the synapses. Yeah.
Thanks.
So yes, when I say with high probability with the construction, with respect to the construction of the connectome. Thank you. That was a helpful question. So simulations show that the dozen steps are enough for typical parameters. Okay, so that's. So is it realistic? Okay, synchronous spiking is unrealistic, but I don't think it's distorted. Okay, but it comparison, because we also repeat simulations with asynchronous models with really very new realistic models, and you get the same results. The basic operation is the natural simplification of the excitatory inhibitory balance. If you ask me what are the hardest parts of this theory for neuroscience to swallow, it's these two red bullets. Assemblies and plasticity, everybody knows that they exist, but people have not thought of them in this time scale. Okay, they think of them as sort of minutes and hours. Okay. And probably, the fact that we are confining an assembly to a single area is not accurate. Okay, so that assemblies are more global. Okay, but this is a simplification that, in some sense, limits our modeling. Okay, good. So projection, and I'm not going to define many more operations, but projection is the most basic one, is how assemblies are born and propagated from the hippocampus to the association cortex. Association cortex, by the way, by this I mean the mammalian cortex minus the sensory and the motor parts. Okay. To enact brain computation and cognitive phenomena. So this is at least what I think happens. So what I want to tell you is that I think that assembly operations are real. They correspond to behaviors that have been observed or that would explain experiments. They are proven, they can be provably compiled down to the activity of neurons and synapses through either mathematical proofs, a simulation of an idealized model, or simulation systems of neurorealistic spiking neurons. So we have done both. Okay. So that's the recap. These last operations are not neurorealistic in any sense. We pull them out of thin air to make this into a real programming language. Okay? So they are controlled ones. Right? So, but that's natural. But I can't justify it in another way. So the question: how powerful is the system? And it's still incomplete. It can perform with high probability, arbitrary, and over case-based computation. Okay, so it's a powerful system. N over k space means n over k parallel time. Okay, so this is very powerful. That n over k is in the thousand. Okay. Good. So, of the two arrows that I have shown you in this central slide, I have shown you that I believe that the assembly operations, the assembly calculus, can be simulated by neurons. Okay, but can it accomplish anything? Can it carry out cognitive functions, higher cognitive functions? Okay, so that's the next step. And that's why we're coming back to language. Okay, so how does the language organ work? Okay, and recently there has been a remarkable book. Okay, so the book that I highly recommend by Angela Federici, and it's called. She's a very prominent cognitive neuroscientist, the Max Planck Institute. And the book is Language in Our Brain, and she put together in a beautiful way. It's not the easiest reading, but it's a wonderful book. A lot of experimental evidence and a lot of things that sort of we're starting crystallizing our understanding of how this thing works. Okay. And then understanding is emerging. Okay, so for example, language is many things. Okay, but let's take the simplest thing, not the simplest, the one most familiar thing, which is what happens now in your brain. Okay, so that I speak and you parse and you understand. So and basically the consensus seems to be that there is an area called the lexicon, okay, which basically has a lot of tens of thousands of assemblies, maybe 100,000, that represent the world. Okay, so every word you know. And this resides in the medial temporal lobe, the purple area. And once you hear this, you hear a particular word, the corresponding assembly fires. And for some reason, something happens in the Wernicke's area, which is the red area, in the red circle in the ellipse in the green area. And that's where something, a combinatorial computation that assigns syntactic roles to words happens. Okay. And eventually, sort of once the structure of the sentence has been decided, this is recorded apparently in Broca's area, where we know that when upon the completion of the sentence, something fires, and upon the completion of the phrase, again something fires in a different domain. So a lot of things have been put together, have been falling in place in this past decade, except that what I told you is sort of static in place. It does not, so there is a passage in a paragraph in page 134 of this book where she says, okay, we all understand that this happens, but the question is, how does this information communicate with its within these various copies? Okay, and basically, as in the end of this paragraph, it says, I hypothesize that there is something like language mirror cells. Okay, mirror cells are some very interesting cells in our brain where sort of when you watch somebody do a strange motion, these cells enact this motion sort of in your motor cortex. Okay, so she's and if you read, when I read this paragraph, I told myself, this woman is trained for assembly. And I talked to her, and she said yes, exactly. That's what I was doing. So I'm going to describe now. Yeah.
If I just ask, when you're showing the lexicon, when you're showing the lexicon, I was thinking back to the Opal experiment that you opened with, and I was thinking that perhaps it should be the case that the 4 Hertz signal ought to be arising from one of the areas,
Right.
and the 1 Hertz from a different area.
Right.
Is there some indication of that?
Okay, so excellent question. So I mean, I'm not familiar with the, they use the magnetoencephalography, which I'm not very familiar with. I'm more familiar with the electroencephalography, and it's supposed to be localized, but in many ways it's not. I mean, you get a very similar signal, which is so, from many electrodes, sort of,
Yeah, but it's supposed to be.
Right. I mean, I mean, I don't know if I have done this analysis. I mean, that is public, so redo that. But that's actually a question. I mean, we are replicating this experiment, and we are doing some extra stuff. And I'm thinking about precisely this your point right now. Yeah. Good. So what I'm going to show you is an experiment that we run. So we wrote a program in the assembly calculus, and it's a parser of English. Okay, it parses English sentences. What's the architecture? The architecture sort of is inspired by what I told you before. Namely that there is a lexicon where all words are stored. And then there is Wernicke's area, which we subdivide into compartments, okay, that have labels, okay, with suggestively by parts of speech, okay, verb, subject, no, part and role, syntactic role, I guess, subject, object, preposition, adjective, and so on. And there are fibers, okay. Fibers, I mean, a lot of synaptic connections. Random synaptic connections, hopefully, okay, that connect these areas, and either the legs with this area or the Wernicke's area or between them. I mean, in fact, between the superior temporal gyrus and the medial temporal lobe, we know that there are a lot of evolutionarily novel fibers. Okay, so that's again consistent with what we know about that area. About the left hemisphere. Incidentally, the left hemisphere is different from the right hemisphere, and we're the only mammal that has this. Okay, it's very different, both cytologically and because new fibers have and larger fibers have popped up in our left hemisphere. Okay, so what's the parser? So one, we know. So each word assembly has an action set, which is inhibit, disinhibit commands. In other words, with this, every word, when it fires, what it does is inhibit some areas and some fibers. Okay, so it disinhibits others. Before and after, so at the beginning and the end of its excitation, and this action set encodes the part of speech of this word. Okay, when the word assembly fires, its action set is executed, and the sum total of word action sets is sort of like the grammar of the subject. Okay, so let's try to parse a sentence. Okay, like cats chase dogs. So this is how we start. This is initial state of the device. You see that the lex to subject fiber is disinhibited. Okay, it's ready to go. Why? Because this is English, and the device knows that it will see the subject before the object. Okay. In other languages, we also have a Russian version. There is now a Japanese version. It's going to have different rules. Okay, it's going to have different action sets in every word. So, if once cats is heard, this assembly fires, and if it fires repeatedly, and there is an open fiber to subject, then then what will happen is that a copy of this, a copy of cats, is going to appear in the fiber. Okay? A new assembly is going to be projected to fiber. Let's look a little closer to the assembly for cats. Okay, it has lots of neurons. Some of them are semantic neurons, like animal and so on. There is some plural neurons, because that's a plural form. There are phonetic neurons that tell us how to recognize it and perhaps how to speak it. And there are action neurons. Okay, these are shared by all nouns. Okay, all nouns have this red part. Okay, they share. So when any noun fires, these action neurons, the same action neurons, are fired. Okay, good. So then chase comes. The action set of chase, because it's a verb, opens up these two fibers. Okay, lex to verb and subject to verb. Again, because it's English. When chase, at the end of chase's activation, what will happen is that the verb, the object, the lex to object fiber is disinhibited, and the verb to object fiber is disinhibited. And then when chase arrives, because of the open fibers, so when dogs arrives, because of the open fibers, a copy of dogs will happen over there. Okay, these are the projections. When I say a copy, I mean sort of the result of the projection. Okay, and the point is, at this point you're going to ask me, and how do you know? It's called it parser. How do you know it parsed? Okay, the point is that assembly synaptic connections will form a valid dependency parse of the cell. Okay, it's one of the formalisms, that with which you can parse cells. Okay, that's very much used in NLP. Any questions? Yeah.
So is it hardwired or are they learned?
Hardwired. So
Are they?
I'll come to that. Yeah, I'll come to that. So is this? Yeah. So, okay. Good. Yeah, I'll come to that. Are they hardwired or learned? Of course, we'll talk about this. Any other questions? So it's written in a slight extension of the assembly calculus. The point I want to emphasize is the following: that this is not a program that has variables, conditionals, and loops. Okay, this program, the extension of this program is just spiking of neurons, nothing else. Okay, just neurons. There is not. Okay, there are many parsers. So in the literature of English, all of them are better than this parser. Okay, so by many miles, none of them is like this in this way. After processing a sentence, it leaves behind a retrieval trail of side effects, which can be called the parse. And the code is available, and have published the paper in Transactions of the Association for Computational Linguistics. So here's an important consideration when you talk about assembly calculus. How are these programs designed? how are they debugged? Who loads them? Who executed? Who fetches the instructions for execution? Right? I mean, this is. So what I'm saying, I mean, so when I'm saying that that's a programming environment, a programming language, a programming system, take it with a grain of salt. You have to program it with utter modesty. Okay, so in other words, not to be sort of very, very not hubris towards these constraints, right? I mean, so for example, the parser is streamlined. Okay, the only thing that happens is that the input words cause some assemblies to fire, and they run the show. Okay, so it's not a program; it's a hardware program in some sense. It's a data flow machine. Okay, and only such programs are going to be accepted. Okay, you cannot start writing the ellipsoid algorithm. So you could, but sort of it makes no sense. Good. It parses sentences such as this: the young couple in the next house saw the old little white car of the main suspect quite clearly. Okay, interesting, it's the speed with which it does it. If you translate it into human spiky neurons, it's about is about as much as I'm doing right now. With more work, you can do sentence embedding. We just did this, okay, this week. For example, I mean, if the young couple who live in the next house, if the parser we had before did this, it would scream, okay, because for a second verb, what is this, okay, but you can embed sentences, right? Then there are the hard parts, polysemy, which means that every word in your lexicon can have many syntactic roles, okay? And how do you choose? So what we have as action set, in fact, it is a distribution of the action sets. And the real parser must have a classifier which for every word can choose one of these action sets. Okay, and if it makes a wrong choice, okay, so there are a lot of things that can be done, but sort of at least we know what to do now. Okay, that's the idea. We have a Russian parser. Okay, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, coming out to your question, okay, Russian key, this Russian parser is very different. Okay, it has different labels for the slightly different labels for the sub areas of beget, and definitely has very different action sets. Okay, and the question is, okay, I'm pretty sure that Russian kids and American kids are born with the same language organ, okay, roughly. And so, I mean, is this a neural basis of language? Is you what I'm asking? I don't know how many of you are familiar with the language culture, but this question is blasphemy. Okay, so you are supposed to, it's unaskable. Okay, here's my point. Okay, that if you do a bold experiment, then this gives you the right to ask this question. Okay, I mean, because we did this, and frankly, 3 people trying to make a program work. It's unlikely that they hit exactly the right spots, or they guessed exactly what the brain does. And frankly, what the brain does probably is going to be much more ad hoc, random, chaotic, wet than anything that I can show you. Okay, but the point is that there's no other contestant. Okay, so I can show you this and say, is this the neural basis of language? Okay. And if so, how do babies find out the labels and the action sets, let alone the 10,000 words. Okay, for me, I mean, this sort of sets up an incredibly interesting problem, and incredibly primordial learning problem. Okay, how can you do this by just listening to a few thousand sentences? Okay. So elsewhere, so what else are we doing? So far, I have not told you why assemblies can be a learning device, okay? But in a very interesting way, they can be, okay? And we have a paper with Santos and his student Max, his budget submission. We're planning with assemblies, okay? So, as is Terry here? So Terry Winograd had this amazing, very pioneering paper in the 60s about the blocks world, okay? So which is this, okay? You see a set of blocks, you imagine another, and what you want is to output robotic instructions for going from one to the other. Okay, so the point is that we can do that with assemblies. And reasoning is something we are working on. So, so the study of the brain is incredibly fascinating, and so by far the steepest slope I've ever climbed. Okay, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Assemblies and operations seem to me a productive way to get computation in the brain. Okay, to bridge the gap. And the parser brought us closer to heretofore forbidden questions. So the big question is, are assemblies a worthy candidate for Axel's logic? Okay? And what experiments and what further experiments, both writing programs that are plausible candidates for producing cognitive behaviors, and also doing experiments on brains, trying to find evidence that it is through assemblies that what happens. And this, of course, nice work. Okay? So these are my collaborators, among others. The paper on planning is with Di Luca Senci and his students. And thank you very much.
So speaking of collaborators, I'm co-organizing this seminar series with Ali Wanti from UCSF. And I know we have a shortcut, but maybe we can get a few questions and you can
get the question. I can start the question.
So actually, Chris Manning raised his hand.
Okay.
Chris, what are you?
Could you say a little about how you start to deal with embedded phrases or sentences? Because I mean, for the little example you gave with whatever cat chase mouse or something, it sort of looked like you were just filling in slots on the left-hand side, and it wasn't really very obvious how that extended.
Yeah.
Having embedding of sentences.
Okay, very happy to do this. Okay, so how do we do extended sentences? Embedded sentences, okay? So it's cats, when they're angry, chase dogs. Okay, that's an embedded sentence. Okay. So how would you do? How the heck can the parser do? So cats. Again, so you project cats there. Then sees the comma. You hear the comma. You know. Be nice to my parser. Okay. So give him a lot of, how do you call it? A lot of hints. Okay, where the embedded sentence starts. And then this is when they are hungry, when they're angry. This is something you can pass fine. Okay, that's no problem. Second comma. Now, what it needs is to go back and get to this. So get to this state of the parser. Okay. In other words, you have to go to the state of the parser of the device before you show the comma. Okay. So how do you do this? Well, so you cannot push a stack. Okay, unfortunately, you cannot remember it. So what you have to do, what you do, what we do in our implementation of embedding, we go back and start from the beginning of the sentence. Okay, and we just tap cuts. Okay, maybe the sentence is most of the time cuts. So you go through the whole sentence until the comma, and you do something which is sort of an order of magnitude faster. You just tap it once, and this has the effect that it brings the device back. My point is, the important point to say is the following: that and the brain area can have many assemblies at the same time. So if you have an embedding and an embedding and an embedding, this means that there are going to be 3 subjects, 3 verbs, and maybe 2 or 3 objects, and that's fine. Yes, absolutely. And then of course you do the right thing. You need an extra area called embedded sentence. Okay, and then through this you connect the verb of the embedded sentence to the verb of the and so on. Okay, so right. Maybe there's an interesting story. So this inspired several other things. So that we can do. But let's see what other questions.
Okay, thank you. I was told you're rebellious, but this is too much. I think even neuroscientists won't touch language, so I appreciate that. So maybe much simpler projects.
I asked Richard Axel, do you think I'm crazy for doing language? And he said, I will be crazy to read language, but you're not crazy. Okay,
so one question I have, are arguing that assemblies are the computational units in the brain, and so why is that, and what are the advantages of having assemblies rather than like cells, for example, just simple neurons?
Okay. The problem is that we have been doing cells since the 19th century. Okay, so Axel thinks that we're stuck.
So I guess.
Okay, so what he thinks we need is this logic, which is something intermediate between cells and whole brain. Okay, and my proposal is that assemblies may be one thing to try.
So does it add, for example, robustness in representation?
Where you are, it's not. This is. I think it does. I think robust representation that assemblies. Their stability is their middle name. Okay, so but what you need is you don't need a separate neural mechanism. You need an explicatory device. Okay, so that you can start understanding how this chaotic neural activity is translated to something that make sense, that are implemented sort of, in the real world. Okay, this is, this is what the assemblies are good for.
And my last question is that, how do you think these assemblies are emerged? Because like in the beginning, perhaps there are no assemblies.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so, I'll tell you what I think. I think that the factory of assemblies is the hippocampus. Okay, so, as you know, every second of our life, the hippocampus is making a few new memories. Okay, so, most of them have no prayer. A few of them are going to be copied, and that's what I mean by, and then they will start having, a life of their own.
Maybe a good idea to break down, thank Christos, and then ask the rest of the questions with the small.
Okay.
Right, thank you very much.